All right. Well, we are on page 93 of the uh, life of the Peace Pilgrim. And we're in a section where she's just accumulating some of her thoughts to ponder, she says. And so we've been going through that. And these are just kind of individual little thoughts, some of them um, not necessarily related. And so we just kind of read them off as wisdom literature, as it were. So her first one, she says, few find inner peace. But this is not because they try and fail. It is because they do not try. Would you agree with that? That most people don't find inner peace because they don't try?
Hmm.
That's probably true to a certain extent because we really do live most of our life on autopilot, But I think it's more a matter of ignorance because we really don't know how to get it. We don't know actually that there's a direct way of attaining inner peace. And I think we just kind of take what we get thinking that's what life is, and we sort of just settle for it. And because the mind is relative, almost anything you settle for becomes okay after a while. I read I read a story that you can die, you can be burned alive without feeling it. If you walk into a room-sized oven and it's room temperature, and you go in there and they raise the temperature 1 degree at a time, they can cook you without you ever feeling it, without you ever realizing, because the body will keep adjusting, keep adjusting, keep adjusting, keep adjusting. And I was told, I don't know if it's true or not, and I don't want anybody to try it, but this is the idea of the problem with living in a relative world, is that, and this is why Thakur says, he says, he makes that statement about really watch your life closely, because he says, have you ever just been walking on a road that had a slow decline, and as you went along, you looked back and saw how far you had come down from where you were? He says, but because it happened so gradually, you didn't notice. And so in our lives, sometimes in our spiritual life, um, we're in the danger of compromising to the point of failure. It's like it's a dangerous thing for us because it's very easy to do because we focus so much on the unconditioned love of God. And what we do with that unconditioned love, if we don't digest it properly, is we take license from it. We start thinking, oh, well, God's got me covered. Okay, I don't have to worry about that. And we slowly basically give ourselves permission just to live an ordinary life. That's in the extreme, of course, but just to live an ordinary life and then not attain the goal in this life. And it's because of relativity that we can get comfortable in pure ignorance because we just accept it.
Am I able to go back and see him or not?
Oop, I think somebody. Okay. So uh, yeah. So I get the message in that is really just we have to stay alert and be careful about relativity because it's deadening, right? And it allows us to slowly accept things that we shouldn't accept. So the way out of that is to live according to your nature. That's what I wanted to add. That's the piece of ignorance. That's what people are missing. That you simply have to live according to love and wisdom in order to have a fulfilling or a contented life. That's all that's necessary. And so really learn to live that way. Engage your love in whatever it is that you're doing, and use your wisdom to guide you in it. And shoot for selfless service. That's the best way to build love for the divine. She goes on. She says, there is nothing that happens by chance in our universe. Okay, nothing that happens by chance. Everything unfolds according to higher laws. Everything is regulated by divine order. Now, this is true, right? If God is, if God is one without a second, then everything that we experience or have the possibility of experiencing, one is unreal. Why? Because God alone is. He's the one without a second. And so even though we're seeing the world of multiplicity, we're actually seeing God and mapping our universe over the top of God, right? By using our senses and our mind and our relative thinking. And if that is the case, then the root of everything that we experience is Satchit Ananda, right? Everything is coming at us from a motive of pure love from the divine and from a motive of wisdom from the divine. And so, from this, keeping that and holding firm to that truth is how we learn to interpret what is happening to us, right? Because we know, one, it has to be for our good, right? It has to be based in love and it has to be based in wisdom. And so it's for us to put together that puzzle, to sit there and think, wow, how did me losing my child, how is that born of love and born of wisdom? You know? And so you sit and you wrestle with it until find that avenue. Because that's what realization is. Realization is when you see everything and understand its direct association with the love of God, right? You see God everywhere present. And consequently, because you see everything motivated by love and wisdom, everything is perfect. There is no error in what is happening.
Right.
And so we can use that as a means of kind of working out our life in a way that will be karmically helpful, right? So that we don't react to what is going on in life and we don't resist what is going on in life. Judging others will avail you nothing and injure you spiritually. Only if you can inspire others to judge themselves will anything worthwhile have been accomplished. Right? That's true. Otherwise, it just comes across as one ego talking to another. You know, and when egos are talking, nothing's accomplished. It's only competition and destruction. That's the only idea behind the ego. The ego is just wanting to be right. It doesn't care about it. And the other person's ego also just wants to be right. They don't, whether it's correct or not is not the issue. It's whether I'm right or not, or whether I lose face,
Ah,
right? And so quite often that's a trouble. So judging others. So we just don't judge others. Now, is there a difference between judgment? Somebody brought this question up to me the other day, and I'm just going to ask you for your input on it. Is there a difference between judgment and discernment? Discerning. You
yeah.
know, it's like because we have to discern, right? That's part of our practice, but we don't want to judge. So what turns discernment into judgment?
Using the I mind to look at faults in opposition to the self, basically.
Okay, so using an incorrect criteria, you think, or
Yeah, just taking it personal from a personal opinionated standpoint versus silence and just kind of feeling the intuitive nature of being.
okay.
I'm
I
thinking
was
about,
thinking it would have something to do with judgment. You somehow you give a sentence,
Mm.
right? A judge takes a look at it, determines how bad it is, and then assigns a punishment to
is it
it. And I
like
was wondering if
intention? Intention also maybe? Like intention, like
yes, yes.
make
Yeah, I
it a
think that
judgment or like with what intention we doing it.
yes.
And
Yes, I
whether or
do
not
think
it's coming from the ego or the heart.
right, whether love is the motive or ego is the motive, right? Yeah.
Say, I would say discernment is, not handling scorpions. Judgment is saying scorpions are a mistake on the planet.
Okay. Right, because you draw a conclusion, you draw a sentence from it saying, yeah, okay. I think that's a very important one. I think it's right. I think all of these together make a good answer. The fact that the intention of it and the motive of it, whether it was from love or from ego, um, whether it was intended, if it's from love, then it's intended to help the person. Truth is clearly the interest, not being right. Being right doesn't matter. And so when you think about, when you see the faults of others, Mother gives us that little formula. She says, don't see the faults of others. See your own faults. Okay, so what I take that to mean, that doesn't mean I close my eyes to the other person's faults and then turn around and consider my own faults. What that meant for me was to understand that for me to see a fault in that other person, that fault has to exist in myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't recognize it. She makes that statement, a baby knows no thief. You can go into a baby's room and he'll be sitting there watching you, and you can steal all of his diapers and he will not raise a single finger of resistance. He will not yell at you, get my diapers back, Mom! This man took my diapers. Not going to happen, right? Because the baby doesn't know thief and the baby doesn't know ownership of the diapers. And so he's not going to yell out an alarm when someone takes all of his diapers out of the room. And so for ourselves, we want a pure mind. That's why we practice. We purify our mind so that when someone comes and steals our diapers, we don't jump up and down and react and cause ourselves karmic trouble. We simply, in the way that, I think it was Brahmananda, he was meditating. He was a wandering monk and he was meditating under a tree one day, and it was very cold out, and he was in deep meditation, and someone came by and put a wonderful new blanket down next to him, folded it for him to use, and he stayed in meditation for a while longer. And after a short while, another person came along and picked up the blanket and walked away with it. And Brahmananda just smiled to himself, how mothers play, first she brings me the blanket and then she takes the blanket away. But that he sees it all as the divine, that it was the divine mother who took the blanket. He doesn't at all think about the person as a thief or draw a conclusion to it. Just accepts the fact this is mother's play. And so we can do it that way also. We can look for the fault in ourselves, right, and see it, and then alleviate our judgment of the other person because of that fault. We'll instead have a compassion or an empathy with their condition, right? And we can also understand that the higher one, and the one that takes more practice to accept, is that notion that God is doing everything. It's his play, it's her play. And so we don't have to worry. We don't have to see the other person as being self-motivated. We can simply say, the divine play, look, it comes, it goes. This is the way it is, right? So both of those will help you in seeing God in others and treating them accordingly, and not getting caught in our own ego defense, which is where karma explodes when we do that.
So, Swamiji, what you're saying is that one should not, so whatever is happening, I mean, there is some free will here, right? So we don't have to worry about if somebody is taking it away, just let it be.
Yes, that's one way.
What's
Just
the
let it
other way?
be. Just blame it on God. Understand God brought it. God took it away. And you just lie and say, great is the name of the Lord, and move on. No worries, right? It was never yours, so it doesn't matter that it was taken away.
But
So
if
all
it
these,
was, somebody
what,
takes it away, then
what's that?
it was mine and somebody took it away, then
Well, your error was saying that it was yours. We try and minimize me and mine, right? And so we let it go. If it's, I think for a householder, I don't know. It's tough to say. I think not being bothered, if something gets stolen and it was valuable and you really loved it, it's a perfect exercise for detachment. You might as well practice detachment, because you're not going to get your thing back. So it's gone. So you have to find a way to accept that.
But Swami, it doesn't mean you don't call the police. Someone
No.
steals your car, you call the police.
Yes, you can. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Swamiji, sometimes, like, people are so unkind to the children, and if you see their fault, and if you reflect on yourself, I mean, how does it work that some people are so unkind to the small children?
Yeah. No, that happens, and we're not always directly responsible. I mean, you there are people that would argue with that. It doesn't matter. But yeah, in that sense, we're talking about the tiger god, right? In that sense, and that's why Jesus makes an important statement. He says, "In as far as it has to do with you, live at peace." Right? So whatever you are in control of and what you are in charge with, put the intention of peace behind it. So as much as it comes up to you, live in peace. That little bit that belongs to the other person, if they're not wanting to put it toward peace, then you just take a step back. You salute them from a distance, right? You stay away from them and give them their space. You still respect them. You don't react to them. You try not to sit there and make it a statement of your relationship. Just kind of let it be. I like what she says here at the end of this, at the second sentence. She says, judging others will avail you nothing and injure you spiritually. Only if you can inspire others to judge themselves will anything worthwhile have been accomplished. And this is just bringing an awareness to their behavior in a wider context, so they can see themselves. And I found the best way for doing this is to have an honest reaction. Someone comes up and punches you in the arm, have an honest reaction. Go, oh my God, that hurt. Why did you just hit me? That's violence, dude. We don't want to talk about that. What can I do for you? Just have an honest, straightforward reaction. It's like, oh, wow, that was a really mean thing to say. Just say it, make it apparent. Like, oh, wow, did you really want to say that to me? That's really angry. That's really mean. Just call it for what it is, and don't make a big dance over that. Otherwise, it'll backfire. But to be honest and just kind of leave it laying as it was, with the truth spoken about it, right? And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, it's still the same. Back off. Back off and give space. And but it doesn't mean you don't have to say anything, or you don't have to express yourself. Even enlightened folks are allowed to get angry, right? But Ramakrishna says the difference is that their anger is like a line drawn on water, right? That means they don't hold grudges. It doesn't hang out in their mind. It means they get angry, they express their anger, and it's finished. They don't hold anything against you. They won't bring it up again to you later. They won't treat you differently afterward. And so anger is there, but it doesn't have a root in an enlightened person. It doesn't become a piece of information by which behaviors come from, as it were. So we forgive and forget those kinds of things. I perceived the entirely self-centered life as not worth living. If what you're doing will not benefit others beside yourself, it is not worth doing. Wow, that's a wonderful and tall ideal right there. If what you're doing doesn't serve anyone but yourself, it's not worth doing. Any push against that? Can you accept that?
But Swamiji, don't we have to eat food for ourselves?
Well, you could make the argument that that's not just for yourself if there are people that depend on you, right?
Yes, that because of that twist, I think it's a true statement.
Yes. Yeah, and I see what you're saying with that twist. And that twist can get even better, because you are divine. And so you have a purpose in your being to manifest that divinity, to manifest that love. And so from that truth alone, nurturing your body, nurturing your mind, taking care of yourself is very important, because it's the temple, right? So you don't take care of it, uh, in the worldly way. So you're not trying to keep it good looking so that you can get your enjoyment partners. You keep yourself in good shape out of a worship of God within the temple, a respect for the divinity that lives within you, right? So you take care of your mind, you take care of your body, you educate yourself, you nurture yourself, you go to the doctors, you take your medicines that you're supposed to take, all of those things to nurture the body and mind for the sake of the beloved, for the sake of love, for the sake of the divine. So we try and keep that line between us and the divine open all the time. That's spiritualizing our life, right? And so that helps us to at all times think of God, so that we don't let our mind just idle at any point. We always are keeping it engaged. If you're sitting on the bus, again, that positive thinking, or doing japam or prayers and blessings for the people that you're looking at around you. Just always keep that conversation, that channel open to the divine all the time, and being like Peace Pilgrim, in that sense of always being aware or always being available for service, for love, and to always remind yourself of that. That's really why we have these classes. It's a weekly, or sometimes several times a week, reminding ourselves of these same truths, so that we can become this, but as our mind purifies. That's the beauty of this. As if you're doing your practice, all of this is going on inside of you naturally. Without you, you don't even have to be aware of it. Each time that you run that name of God through you, you're a little bit less selfish than you were, because you have invoked the presence, and that each time takes a sense of me and mine away from you. Every thought of God purifies you. And so we keep doing that, because one day we'll wake up and just realize that, well, we may never realize, but somebody will realize that you became a saint, right? You became a saint. And if you did it perfectly, then you're the last one to know. Right? You're the last one to know, because you didn't do any of it. You just simply fell in love with God and became and manifested the beauty that was always there. It's no longer being hidden and tarnished through your layers of, tarnish, selfishness, me and mine. The godly way is one of the few simple precepts that even a child can understand. Truth is simple. It's just not so simple to live it. Therefore, immature people tend to hide behind complicated interpretations in order to avoid living simple truth, right? That's always a danger. Complicating things to make them difficult and then finding a way through them or around them, right? And that's, we see that in the world. That's why all of these, if you ever try and read a bill in Congress or a law, the verbiage of it and all of that blah, 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 legalese, that's so hard to understand. It's for that reason. It's initially, the reason is to tie down and strap down every loose point so that nobody can get around it or figure out a loophole. But if the person is not entirely honest, it can also be difficult simply to create a loophole that won't be easily seen by anybody else. And so complication is always a sign of some what shall we say, some lint, some lint in the laundry. Some you have to be careful of that. And in our own selves, if something can be very simply said to us, and if we're very uncomfortable about it, we'll try and think about it in a way that allows us to get around it. We try and find a way to weaken it, or to soften it, or to make room for ourselves. And I can only say this because I've watched myself. I've watched my mind, and this is the way it works. This is how that toddler behaves. And this is why we practice. This is why we have to watch. This is why we have to observe, right? Because that that mind is really more concerned about the body and itself than is about anything else in the world. And so when we identify it, we tend to come out with the same conclusions. So we have to be careful. Truth is simple. Humanity has only scratched the surface of its real potential. Anyone can plug into the divine current by discovering the truth of Jesus and other prophets who taught that the kingdom of God is within. Right? So that's the whole of it. There's so much freedom in that, and so much open air, freshness in that notion that you do not need anything outside of yourself for any of this. That realization comes from within you, and that which is realized is already true within you. That's why they call it realize. It's like, oh, I just realized it's right here in my hand, right? So that's why they call it realization. Oh my God, my whole enlightenment has been sitting in my heart all of this time, and I've been less than a foot away from it and never even caught a hint of it, right? And so that realization needs to happen there, right? And so humanity's only scratched the surface. I would say they haven't even scratched the surface hardly. We haven't discovered this at all, because vast majority of us are running around in a panic trying to find the meaning of life outside of ourself, right? What is the purpose of life? Well, you have to create it, right? Go create the purpose of your life. No, the purpose of your life is manifestation, exhibiting God, that God nature that is naturally and divinely yours. The purpose is simply to allow its expression, because it expresses beauty, it expresses wholeness, it expresses love, it expresses harmony, it expresses unity, And so this is what we want to focus on. This is how we want to live ourselves. And it doesn't matter whether humanity's doing it or not. Really, the question is, how did you do it today? Has it happened for you today? So that truth that the kingdom of God is within, that is how we find our real potential, because our potential is the expression of that truth, right? To letting that truth come out in our actions, in our intentions, in our purposes. If you want to teach people, young or old, you must start where they are, at their level of understanding, and use words they understand. When you have captured their attention, you can take them as far as they are able to go. If you perceive that they are already beyond your level of understanding, let them teach you. Since steps towards spiritual advancement are taken in such a varied order, most of us can teach one another. And even if we can't teach one another, we can always inspire one another, right? The attempts that you make, if you're a sincere person, an earnest person, you can be inspiring. You can share your stories. You can tell about the times you tried and failed. You can talk about how many times you had to give it a go before you finally succeeded, right? And one thing I've learned as being someone who's I don't know if I've done it or if it's just kind of happened. I don't know. Who's doing these kinds of classes and whatnot. I've been taught many, many, many times that all interactions are always two-way. That in God's classroom, no one is just the teacher and no one is just the student. Everybody's a teacher and everybody's a student all the time. And I tell my story. The time I really learned that, the first time I really saw it clearly and felt ashamed of myself, was in Michigan with that woman who had broken her neck, in that car accident. And she wanted to talk to me about it. And thought that she wanted my advice, that I could do something. And so I went and met with her. And she told me the story how a year ago she had lost her husband. They had only been married less than a year. She was deeply in love with him. And he was killed in a car crash with no warning. And she said, I was suffering from my grief for a year. And she said, at the end of that year, I myself got into a car accident and broke my neck. And she says, I live in severe pain all the time now. And the doctors tell me that there is no way that it's going to be alleviated, that this was something I'm going to have to live with. So initially, she said they put me on all these painkillers. And she said for 6 months, I lived half aware of reality, living on these pills. And she said, during that 6 months, I sat down and just wept one day. She thought, I can't live like this. I don't want to be half conscious for the rest of my life in a fog, And then she said, and even then, it's not taking care of the pain completely. It's just kind of deadening it a bit. So she said, I decided I was going to quit taking those drugs, and then I would use that pain as my mantra. I would use pain to remind me of the presence of God. And then I would keep it continually in my mind to keep me continually aware of the presence. And she says, I've been doing that for a while. And she says, it's been beautiful. It has helped me so much. I can live with this now. And she says, it's also opened up other avenues of service, because she said, I used to be a yoga instructor, and I wanted to teach people spiritual life, and I was doing it with my yoga. And she said, I realize I can't do that yoga anymore because I can't move my body. She said, and so remember I told you that story that she opened her house on Fridays, and during the week she would go out and hand out business cards to needy people with a time on it. And she would give these people an hour at her home, and they could come there and they could take a nap in the guest bed. They could take a shower. They could bring their clothes and use her washing machine. She would have tea for them or whatnot. And so one day a week, she opened her house to those people that she had invited during the week to come and just minister to them for that day. And when I walked away from there, I was like, wow, who was I to think that I had something to teach her? I really went home. I really had a wonderful prayer with Mother, just apologizing that I had assumed that I was the teacher and that she would use me to teach. And I was very blessed to actually find a teacher and to be taught, something beautiful, something amazing, actually, like that. And so it's really helpful to destroying the ego for us to always consider ourselves both the student and the teacher, always. And when we hear something that somebody says that's a value, bring it out. Bring it out. This is sort of what we're doing in our Friday classes, every other Friday class here in Santa Barbara. Is we're trying to have teaching happen on the idea that we're all divine and we all hold this divine truth within us. Now, egoism blocks it, distorts it. So a lot of times the things that we think are true are not. The things we think are helpful are not. But with a little bit of conversation, a little bit of prodding and sculpting as you ask questions and talk, a person can bring themselves to truth. And if you remember, that was one of the first things that she said up here about, judging others. She said, only if you can inspire others to judge themselves will anything worthwhile have been accomplished. It's that same thing with teaching, which is kind of the same thing, that a person teaches themselves. It's more powerful, I think, when you initiate an idea and then through conversation perfect that idea, sculpt it, but all the time allowing that other person to have the sense of ownership of that idea so that they feel like, I saw this, I know this to be true. So we allow this, as we teach, we do it in such a way that we allow what is being taught to become the other person's own, right? They're going to feel a little different about it. They're going to think a little bit differently about it. And as the teacher, you have to really be able to let go of it yourself and allow it to exist as it exists in that person's context, that person's life, that person's world, right? And you just have to be careful, just watching and discerning and praying, depending on mother is the best way, uh, to hope that you're not missing something, because there are small untruths that can, or things that we can think about truths that give us permission not to obey them or to get around them or to weaken them somehow. So we have to pay attention to that. But in general, just to keep that ego soft so that it doesn't react, it doesn't fight back, it doesn't get provoked into weird things. And the best way is to always being open to being wrong, or always being open to being the student, right? And to always understand that just like what St. Paul says, all things are lawful, right? Yeah, all things are allowable, but not all things are helpful, right? So you see how that takes the edge off, to say that not all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. That way you don't go around and be like, that's wrong, you're wrong. You can say, well, that works, but it's not quite as helpful as this idea, right? And that takes it helps not turn it into a confrontation. When you say, yes, that's a great idea, but what would you do about it in this circumstance? Or how would you deal with it in this circumstance, right? And so you kind of work with it, mold it until everybody can see it, right? And not doing it from an egoistic, look at me, I'm right perspective. And also not being, that also shows out with not being terribly concerned that it was your idea, right? I want credit. I said that. I did that, right? And that's a hard one. that's a really difficult one, because I was listening to one of my fellow monks' lectures online, I don't know, about a week ago. And I heard, and it could have been egotism on my part from the beginning to the end, which would be hilarious. But I thought that I kept hearing him say buzz phrases that I feel I originated, right? The little ways of saying things, the little truths and whatnot. I kept hearing him say them during his lecture. I was like, that's my idea. That's my, and I, as I was doing it, I was sitting there watching. I was like, dude, shut up. These truths are apparent to everybody who's reading these materials. It's like there is nothing, you are not the cherry on this cake. you need to back off, right? And so we watch again, this watchfulness inside, right? So we can learn and catch ourselves before we jump. Right? So if you want to teach people young and old, you must start where they are, right? So always respect people where they are, because they are exactly where God has put them. And you must always understand that. And you must always consider that if you're asking them to move, right? If you're asking them to change, you have to know inside that, one, you're doing this because you love them, you care about them, not because you know better, and not because you're right, but because you want them to have a great life. Right? So you start where they are at their level of understanding, and use words that they understand. Right? This is the reason I don't use Sanskrit in my lectures. This is the reason I don't stand up and do a Sanskrit chant. Not that I'm against it, and I don't think anybody that does it is doing it for egotistical reasons. I just know for me, I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. I can read it and I can study it. I'm not a scholar. I don't have any business putting myself up there and presenting myself as if I'm a Sanskrit linguist, as if I'm a studier, because Sanskrit is one of those things you can't take it for a year or two. Sanskrit is it's a lifelong study. If you ever meet Swami Vedananda, God, I saw in Swami Vedananda why people study Sanskrit, you know, because I was always like, I've got so many translations in English. What do I need Sanskrit for? And I still stand by that. But Swami Vedananda studies it every day for a couple of hours every single day. And I studied with him. I studied Sanskrit with him for 2 years when I was in San Francisco. And we translated the Gita together as our exercise. And in doing that together, I got to sit with him, and he could pick out a verse in Sanskrit, and he could pick out a word, and he could take that word deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, because he not only knew what that word meant in Sanskrit, he also knew what that word meant in many of the other places it was used in the scriptures that give it a little bit of a coloring as to like what that word can mean or what it carries with it. And I sat there one day watching him parse out a Sanskrit verse in the Gita and just come up with such a beautiful depth to it, you know, a beautiful insight to it. I was like, wow, that's why people are studying Sanskrit right there. That's incredible, right? And so if you're going to do it for that reason, because it's beautiful and because it's helpful, because it's lovely. Don't do it because you want them to know you know it. Don't do it because you want to show off your scholarship, right? So catch them where they are, stay at their level of understanding, use words that they will understand. And when you have captured their attention, you can take them as far as they're able to go. So don't push them beyond what they want, and don't push them beyond what they really need. You know, be careful. They don't have to be where you're at. They don't have to meet your criteria. You know, give them what they need. Do the best you can being with them. Give them as much as they're able to take or as much as they're wanting to take, and then bless them. Go forward, right? If you perceive that they are already beyond your level of understanding, which this does happen, this can happen, right? Let them teach you. That's all. Since steps towards spiritual advancement are taken in a varied order, most of us can teach one another, right? Because it's not like we're all studying computer science together and we're all, you know, having to be at a certain level. It's that we're all being trained all the time through how many thousands of lifetimes so far. So none of us are stupid. None of us are completely ignorant. And we can all learn something from each other. And this is something that's very important, especially these days, because we've got a lot of centers that have no swamis, right? And one of the things that I've been dealing with is a lot of times the center takes on that identity. Oh, we don't have a swami, right? And so they think their only option is to invite other swamis from every place. And so they go about bringing swamis in as much as they can. That's all fine and good, but you're missing one of the greatest resources, your own selves, right? And if there's this is learn from each other, be willing to learn from each other. You know, there's a certain arrogance or a certain egotism in only being willing to learn from swamis, right? That's an egotism. that, that's saying there's nobody else good enough except I have to go find me a swami to learn from. Mother has put thousands of people. Mother's put your mother in the picture. Mother's put your father in the picture, your brother in the picture. We can learn from each other. You know, when I was growing up in the Christian church, one of the things I kind of liked is a very different. This is just something that I noticed. It's quite different from the way we do Vedanta, and I think we could benefit from this idea a little bit. You know, when I was growing up, that our classes in church, it wasn't just reading and commenting on things, which is kind of how almost all Vedanta is taught. It's reading the books and then commenting on the scriptures. Most of the time, our classes were topic oriented. So there would be a Wednesday night class for how to have a successful Christian marriages or spiritual marriages, how to have a spiritual marriage, or how to build spiritual friendships, or how to raise children to be faithful. You know, and those are great topics. How to raise children to be faithful. I know that you can find many swamis who will stand up and give you a lecture on how to raise faithful children. I wouldn't give a nickel for it. What what is a Swami, going to teach you about raising children? The nuances of that and the depth of that and the amount of experience in that is not for a Swami to give a class on. What we need is to find a devotee who's got faithful children, who have left the house and are and have strong practices and are loving, serving, caring people. And we need to ask their parents, wow, that's beautiful. How did you do that? Will you put together a class to teach the rest of us how you raised faithful children? Or to find someone in the congregation who has a great marriage. They've been married for 70 years and they're still very much kind to each other and haven't broken the relationship. Find someone like that and say, wow, look at that. What a great relationship. Can you teach us how to do that? Right? How to have a great marriage. And so always, always, always cultivate in yourself that student, even Thakur, incarnation of God. He says, so long as I live, so long will I learn. I am a student in all things, right? That's being humble. That's being humble, to look at somebody and understand I can learn from them. And sometimes being willing to ask, even somebody quite humble, hey, can you show me how you did that? Right? I was very touched. I went to Bhubaneswar in India, and they took me out to the ocean, to the beach. And of course, I spent a lot of years in California. When I see a beach and an ocean, if the water's warm, I jump in. So I literally just ran into the water. And the Swamis, oh my gosh, did I cause a panic? They were like, oh no, you can't, you're going to drown. But anyway, I went out there and there were some big waves. And so I started body surfing, right? And these brahmacharis had never seen somebody body surf before. And as soon as I was walking through the shallows to get out of the water, this grown brahmachari, probably 30 years old, a young man, comes up to me wide-eyed. Oh, Maharaj, will you teach me? Please, you must teach me how to do that. You must teach me, please. He was so humble and so open and so excited about it. I was so touched. I was like, because I'd never seen a grown man being willing to be that vulnerable and excited about something that I could do that they couldn't, and just having no sense of shame or that he didn't know or hadn't already done that at his age. And I thought that is the way to be. That's the way to be. Always be interested in knowledge, always being interested in being taught, in doing better, and not holding on to covering our faults, to covering our mistakes, so that people think of us better than we are. Right? That's such a dangerous thing, especially in a sangha. We should all know that all of us are trash. Right? We should just know it. We're all trash. Ain't nobody here exceptional in anything. We're just going on with our life, being human beings, doing the best we can do. And that's beautiful. And that's totally fine, right? That's totally fine. We don't have to put on a show for each other. I don't have to demonstrate anything to you. You don't have to demonstrate anything to me, because as a sangha, we have given each other's our respect already. Right? As a sangha, we've given our respect already. We've identified the divine principle in each one of us. We know it's there. And so any pretense is unnecessary and painful. Right? So be weak when you're weak. Be sad when you're sad. Cry when you need to cry. Ask for help when you need to ask for help. Get a hug when you need a hug. Right? Ask somebody to come over and help you with something when you need somebody to come over and help you do something. Do not pretend that you've got this. Right? This is why Mother gave us Sangha. This is why she gave us Holy Company, so that we can hold each other up. Even to the extent, if we know somebody's got a weakness, we try and not get them in a situation where that weakness becomes obvious. Right? We try and protect each other in that sense also. Looking out for each other, empathizing and caring. All right. Life is a mixture of successes and failures. May you be encouraged by the successes and strengthened by the failures. As long as you never lose faith in God, you'll be victorious over any situation you may face. That's a beautiful thing to remember right there. I'm glad I picked one more verse before we ended. Life is a mixture of success and failures, right? Nobody zooms to the top. All those people on America's Got Talent, you know, ain't none of them surprisingly just sailing to the top. They were selected. The whole script was written. It's not a real thing, right? So may you be encouraged by the successes. Yes, be happy. Take the successes to your shrine. That's very important. You know, if you're trying to quit lying and you've been a horrible liar and you just manage one day not to tell a lie, go immediately to the shrine. You have something beautiful to give to Mother. Do not forget it. Take that to the shrine and give it to her. Offer it and be happy, right? You've got something to offer. So when something good happens, go to the shrine and offer it. If you've done something right, if you've moved forward, if you've been encouraged. And if you failed, right, be strengthened. Get stronger for it, not weaker. Don't hold a record of being wrong and then identify with being wrong and think, oh God, I'm just a failure, right? That's the temptation. Don't do it. Be strengthened by it. What did I learn from that? Oh, I learned I should wait for the train to stop moving before I jump off. Right? Okay, I right? There we go. Narayani, I'm not a failure, I'm trash. That's right, Narayani. As long as you never lose faith in God, you will be victorious over any situation you may face. Right? As long as you never lose faith in God. If you can't get over something like I've been battling with things, you know, some things that I've been battling with literally my whole adult life. And I've wondered why does God not lift this from me? And you know, in the New Testament, Paul also has a situation, something he's really struggling with. He doesn't tell you what it is. And he goes to Jesus and says, you know, I have been begging you to take this problem from me. I've prayed 3 times over it, and you haven't done anything. And Jesus' response to him was, my grace is enough for you. Right? So there was a purpose in Paul for Jesus to keep that struggle alive in Paul, because it kept Paul humble, right? Kept Paul remembering he needs grace, kept him turning to God, right? And isn't that true? How many of our faults lead us to God? We're like, we're going and just trying. Oh God, I can't believe it. Oh man, right? And so we go forward. All right, we'll stop there for today. Let me